following Suella Braverman's speech yesterday to the AEI, does the panel think that this government is racist?
What's your answer to your own question, David?
I don't know about the whole government, but I believe certain elements of the government are.
Which you presumably include Suella Braverman in?
Yes, that's after my lived experience in South Africa for 10 years at the end of apartheid, when the country was living under a system that classified people racially, and it's a long story, but that's my position.
Okay. Well, the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees has today rejected the Home Secretary's calls for international asylum rules to be tightened. Okay, Kiko.
I wondered if you would come to me first. David, I really liked your answer. Yesterday's speech, what to say about that? I was slightly on the fence about it in a way because, do we take this kind of thing seriously or not? It just wasn't very credible.
She's Home Secretary.
I know, but it was just so not sensible or grown up or plausible, and that was the reaction,
What do you think the motivation was?
Well, it's clearly a leadership piece, right?
Mm-hmm.
But, there's an element of rogueness around it, which I think, and that I think kind of comes back to the, one of the main questions around the speech.
And it was cleared by number 10.
But was it?
No, it was.
Okay.
I know for a fact it was.
Well, why was it in D.C.?
Well, you'd have to ask her that, wouldn't you?
Mm.
So, I suppose going back to your question, it feels like, electioneering, but that's actually actively harmful to people and communities because of what you just said, Ian, because she is Home Secretary. You have to take it seriously, even though it is deeply unserious.
The issue she raised, though, even if she did it in a, shall we say, rather clumsy, cack-handed way to be kind, the issues she raised do have to be addressed, though. We're operating under asylum rules that were created in the 1950s. We're now in 2023. There are 145 countries belong to the the Refugees Convention, and it would be a nightmare to get them to all agree to reform it. But in the end, the only way that you're going to solve any crisis, and this is a crisis, is for countries to come together and agree a new way forward, isn't it?
So I completely agree. We need to be having a very different conversation about this, and it needs to be a grown-up conversation. Who is making the economic case for migration in government? Absolutely no one. No one is brave enough to make that, to make that call.
All the opposition come to that matter.
Exactly. And that is the problem. So, the solutions that are needed are going to require deep cooperation between countries. They're going to require a pan-European response. They're going to require deeply unsexy work, funding, the kind of processing systems, here. And that is very, very far away from the type of harmful rhetoric that we're seeing. At a time when the
world is much more fractured and much more fragmented, and the forces are deglobalising and de-risking.
But aren't politicians like her the reason that the world is fracturing? Because they're using divisive language.
Mobility has intensified and increased significantly since those rules were there, and it is a big problem. And it needs. I'm half Ukrainian, a quarter Romanian, and a quarter Polish.
That's a frightening combination.
It is a frightening. It's a lethal combination. My grandparents came from, we think, Kiev in 1899. Couldn't speak a word of English. Marriage certificate had crosses on it. So I'm very sympathetic to the immigrant case. However, having said that, the numbers involved are huge now. And the disruptions are huge. We're talking about Africa, the Middle East, wherever it happens to be. And it's the rules were created at a time when the problem was a very different problem in terms of scale. So much as we dislike what she said yesterday, and the reasons maybe why she said it, there is a point there, which you pointed out, which is you have a massive problem that you have to deal with. And how do we get together to deal with it at a time when we have major geopolitical problems which are pulling people apart?
And they're only going to get worse as well.
Exactly.
Which is a cue for Natalie to say that climate change will be worse. But if you accept, Natalie, that We can't have open borders in this country. We're not. I mean, you could argue that Australia could, that maybe America could. They have the landmass. I don't think anybody's really saying that there should be open borders, but she's, in her speech yesterday, which I did listen to the whole thing, she seemed to be arguing, or the effect of her argument would be that Britain wouldn't be taking any refugees at all.
Well, I think coming back to David's question to start off with, and I think David in his own answer very clearly made it clear, he said, well, some parts of the government. And as Akiko said, this was a deeply unserious speech. If you take it from a Home Secretary, it was clearly a bid to be on the Trumpian right. If you take it as someone who's going for, after the Tories lose the next election, going for Tory members' backing. And that's, we don't have a government. We have a far-right, chaotic mess of people who were just fighting among themselves, and that is a huge problem. But to come to your specific point, I mean, yes, there are going to be a huge number of climate refugees. The first thing to say is that the vast majority of the world's refugees are in neighbouring countries, often poor neighbouring countries who are welcoming them despite the most overwhelming barriers of problems of caring for them. And I think, Britain has shown what it can do. Martin referred to the Ukrainians, 180,000 Ukrainians. Greatly welcome that. I'm co-chair of the All-Party Parliamentary Group on Hong Kong. Britain has done an excellent job of welcoming people from Hong Kong. Why have we not done the same job for Afghans, including significant numbers of Afghans who worked for us and are now have their lives in most acute danger because of what they did? Well, I think we look at across the whole of the EU, they receive 22 asylum applications per 10,000 people. We get little more than half of that, 13 asylum applications. And I just want to pick up one point. Because there is a party that's prepared to look at those issues and talk about this in a positive way.
Who would that be, Natalie?
It would be the Green Party, you'd be surprised to know. And I can appoint you to I had a 10-minute speech, unusually opportunity in the House of Lords. And I pointed to the fact that if you look at how this debate is going to change, I'm confident it will change in the coming years. We have got global birth rates falling off a cliff. We have fast ageing populations around the world. I believe we are going to shift quite soon to a world in which people are going to recognise human resources, people, their energy, their time, their talents, their abilities, is a resource that we have to treasure and value and look after. And we want a world where no one is forced to move, but people who want to move by choice should have options, whether they come from the UK and restore freedom of movement with the rest of Europe, which our young people so suffer from not having now, or to allow a balanced number of people in from all around the world.
With all due respect, that's utopian at a time when the fractures in the world, US, China, Russia, Ukraine, Iran, take the top three, in my view, when it's splitting apart. And these are issues that are probably unsolvable.
What do you think about the birth rate?
I agree. Elon Musk, go on YouTube, watch the interviews with. Sorry for mentioning it. Go and watch what he says about. Absolutely, he's one of the people that caused it. You're absolutely right.
Isn't this a strange thing for you to say, Natalie? Because over the years, the Green Party have warned about overpopulation. And if we have a lower birth rate, presumably the population comes down, you should be delighted.
The Green Party has always said that the human footprint is a product of the number of people multiplied by their consumption levels. The UK, we use our share of 3 planets every year, and we've only got 1 planet. So we have to cut our consumption. That is the issue, and it has always been the issue, and that's always what the Green Party said.
Kate?
So, first, I think the language is pretty ugly. And as a Conservative, I find it makes me feel uncomfortable. So I'd start with that. Secondly, I think that it's a distraction from the fact that she hasn't delivered on small boats. And actually, migration has gone up and up and up. And in fact, that's the one place where I'd slightly disagree with the conversation, because we have got economic migration. It's actually going up. So the government don't talk about that, but they are doing it. So I think that's partly why she's going to America and making this speech. She's also clearly it's a beauty pageant coming into next week, coming into the party conference. I remember in 2015 when David Cameron had said he wasn't going to run again, coming back after a victory. It should have all been about him. And what did we have? We had a beauty pageant for the next leadership. So that's what we're seeing as well. And then finally, I would just say this is an incredibly important issue. There are lots of variables here. Climate's one of them. War, Nagorno-Karabakh, we've just had another one. We're going to get lots more refugees, some of them economic, some of them who really are, avoiding war, famine, and we have to be honest with people about the pathways, and we probably do need to sit down with all our allies internationally to talk about it. So please, can we do that rather than make speeches that get headlines and make it more difficult to have those conversations?
I mean, as someone who used to work in Number 10, you would have expected the speech to be cleared, probably through you, maybe.
Yes.
Why do you think they did clear it?
Well, there's clearing of speeches, as you may know. And I mean, sometimes you see a speech and then the really exciting line is not there. Oh, it came in at last minute. Or if you actually look at the
there's always a way around
yes. So I don't know whether they cleared the full speech or not, but I read every party conference speech that every cabinet minister gave, and you didn't even always see the punchy lines right there.
And what happens when you read a speech that someone wants to give at a party conference and you think, well, actually, A, this isn't government policy, B, this is somebody putting forward their leadership ambitions. How do you handle that?
Well, you have a tough conversation with them, and the Number 10 heavies get heavy with them. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. Well, in my day, it would have been, myself and Llewellyn and Craig Oliver and the comms people, and sometimes even, the boss.
I can't imagine any of you being heavy.
We were effective. But yeah, sometimes that didn't work. And especially if they felt there was an opportunity. And that comes back to the point I said about 2015. David didn't really give people an opportunity, or there wasn't a lot of leadership chatter during his time, apart from Boris, of course. And Boris, you could never control his speech. Even he didn't know what he was going to say.
It's slightly strange, isn't it, that if it did go through Number 10, it was allowed. If you think about it, if it was primarily the beauty pageant as you laid it out, and I agree with you. I mean, I think everybody in the cabinet and beyond are looking at their futures post the election, assuming that the Conservatives lose.
But surely the interesting thing here is that Rishi Sunak himself is apparently quite hardline on immigration. So you've got the two of the top people in government, both of whose parents immigrated to this country, both of whom are non-white, and
and they're missing their targets.
Yeah.
That's the point. I mean, that sort of distraction point, I think, is important because they know, one of the top 5 of Rishi's targets, small boats, it's not going well.
But I think, Ian, I've got to pick you up on being tough on immigration. As Kate pointed out, there has been opened up lots of routes into the country, immigration. What they're being tough is very deliberately, in a very stagey, very theatrical manner, is tough on some of the most vulnerable people in the planet, i.e. refugees.
Well, they would no doubt counter that a good proportion of the people that are coming across the channel do not qualify as refugees, but that's kind of a whole different argument, which we haven't got time to get into.
I mean, last year it was there was only 24% of applications were refused, and those would have mostly been people coming across the channel. And then when they appeal,
a third of
the appeals are then successful. So the vast majority of people are refugees.
Right, we will move on in just a moment. It's 8:32.